Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kensington Corner. I am Jeff.
And I'm Tom. Today we are here with Jason Kander, former Army Intel S2 officer. What years did you...
So I was in basically 03 to 11 in the Guard and Reserve, and then spent some active duty time.
Nice. Very nice. And Jason, you are, I don't want to screw up the name with it, Veterans?
I work here at Veterans Community Project. I run the national expansion.
You want to tell us about that?
I would love to tell you about it. Thanks for asking. Thanks for coming here. So Veterans Community Project is a nonprofit founded by combat veterans. Not me. I'm late to the party. But it's founded by a group of guys here in Kansas City who said, all these holes in veteran services, this is really annoying. We think we can do a better job. And so Veterans Community Project exists to fill gaps in veteran services. That's what we do here. We fill in the gaps. We don't replicate services. We don't advocate for policy changes. We're a social service agency. And there's two big things that we do. One is the residential side. We fight veterans homelessness. We have a village just about 200 meters from where we're sitting now, a village of tiny houses that has helped eradicate veterans homelessness in Kansas City. And then we also have non-residential services, which is like a walk-in operation with wraparound services for any veteran, whether you served 1 day or 20 days or 20 years, whatever, in the military. We always say we don't care what's on your DD-214. We just care that you have one. And if you don't have it with you, we'll go get it for you. And the way I got involved is I had toured the place when I was running for mayor, was super impressed by it. And about 6 weeks later, realized it was time for me to step back from public life, get help for post-traumatic stress. And I found the process at the VA more onerous than I expected. Yeah. And I thought, I'll call those folks over at Veterans Community Project. They said, yeah, we'll help you. I came walking in the door, just like any other of the thousands of vets in Kansas City. And they took care of me, got me into the system, and look at me now.
Right. So, that's got to be a real motivating factor for you. The fact that you've actually come through this program and utilized these services. Is that a motivational thing for you on a day-to-day basis, just being here, providing great service to our veterans and to our community, really?
It's really easy for me to be sort of the chief evangelist of the organization, right? It's like the old joke, I'm not the president, but I'm not just the president. I'm also a client, the old hair club for men thing. That's me, and so I can speak to the necessity of it. But it's also just one of those things where it's a new chapter in my life where I'm able to use my platform and cash it in for my fellow combat veterans and all veterans. And that's super gratifying for me.
Yeah, I was going to say that I was curious because I have obviously, heard about the project before, but very sparingly until you came on. And so I was curious about just when you were brought in, how did that look like? Obviously you used the services, but what did it look like when you were actually brought on?
Well, what it looked like was after they helped me out with my paperwork and everything, about 7 or 8 months later, I'd been, going through therapy at the VA. Things were going very well for me. And I started just kind of hanging around and volunteering. And I'd been at top organizations before. So maybe offering a little bit of mentorship here and there to some of the leadership. And then at some point, Brian, one of the co-founders and CEO now, friend of mine, he said, everybody wants us to come to their community and replicate this, but we don't know how to build a national organization. You've done it. Do you want to just come here and do that? Because he knew at that point that I was also thinking, okay, I'm going to go back to work. Yeah. What do I want to do here? And I just jumped at it. I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love being here. I love the mission. I love the people here. I just love being around it. And I just thought that is a perfect way for me to use my skill set and my network in a way that's not about me. It's not about politics or advancing my career. And it's also not about what a lot of former politicians do. I'm not cashing in to make a bunch of money.
Right.
I'm just cashing in for veterans. And I feel great about that. So it was an easy choice for me.
So where is the program then, as far as a national expansion? Is it still just a Kansas City only thing, or is it something that we're seeing branching out into other parts of the country? Or
so the objective that we've set is to go into 8 additional locations around the country by the end of 2022. we break ground on, we refer to Veterans Community Project as VCP. So we break ground on VCP Colorado this spring. Okay. And then the nice thing is, because I was able to sort of do like a real media blitz on it, like once, because I was able to take advantage of the fact that there was an element, I'm not going to say a large element, there was a piece of the world that was curious what I was going to do next. Right. And I was able to leverage that to do just a whole bunch of national media around it. And that helped us like sort of bring attention to it. And then the product is so good, I don't have to sell it, right? The product is so good. It's just putting it on the map to all these cities so that they can then come and be like, okay, no, we want one. And so now it's like the problem with veterans homelessness and holes in the system is so large. I'm not even doing expansion based on where is the problem the biggest, because it's huge everywhere. It's everywhere, yeah. So it's just where can we deploy the fastest? So like right now, the cities that are really doing well at accelerating that process, Cincinnati has been great to work with so far. I'm going to New York this weekend. There's some talks there. I'm going to forget some, but St. Louis, Orlando, having great talks with Dallas. There's several others, but like those are kind of Oklahoma City. Okay. Those are kind of the ones that are in the hopper, but like Cincinnati, Myrtle Beach, some other, it's just everywhere needs it. And it's exciting to see how many places are like, yeah, we get this. It makes sense. We want you here.
Right. Now, when we're talking timeline, was the you hopping on board here, was that after writing the book or before?
My book?
Yeah.
My book came out in August of 18.
Yeah.
And then I stepped back from public life in October. So like, I still recommend the book to people, but chapter 9, like if I had another shot at it, I'd probably describe what I was going through a little differently. Now that I've been through
edition,
therapy. Right? Yeah, well, my publisher has talked to me about that. I'm trying to finish living it before I write it, though. Yeah,
I hear that. Yeah, I actually threw your book up the other day on a live stream that I was doing. So Jeff and I, we both ordered it. I was just curious, when Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie Davis, who did the last episode with us, when she was telling me about you, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm obviously interested. I want to sit down and talk to him. And she was like, he's a great guy. You're gonna love him. But that's how Stephanie is. She's like, you're gonna love him. I'm like, okay, well, let's sit down and talk. And so I was really curious, one, about your backstory. And I just for the audience, we had talked previous on this that we weren't really going to touch that much on the past because I wanted to talk about the future more than anything. But if you want to touch on it really quick,
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
So as far as my backstory, let's see. Okay, I'm 5th generation Kansas City. Was thinking, hey, I was raised with the idea of service in my family, and not military service, but just serving others. My dad was a cop at night. My parents met because they were juvenile probation officers in their day jobs. So that's kind of the type of house I grew up in. Went to school on the East Coast. Was thinking, maybe one day I'll serve. I didn't really know what that meant. Didn't know if I ever would. And then I was in DC, 9/11 happened. And like a lot of folks our age was like, well, I'm clearly going to do that. So went in, did ROTC during law school at Georgetown. Didn't go in as a JAG, went as a military intelligence officer, got downrange in October of 2006 to Afghanistan. And they said, okay, we got 2 jobs you could do. I was there. I replaced a lieutenant colonel. I was a second lieutenant, which was all sorts of weird. And they said, okay, we need an analyst for the night shift. They said, but we also have this thing. We need somebody to go out and investigate corruption and espionage within the Afghan government, and the Afghan military. So it was basically kind of like human work, human intelligence work. Obviously, one of those was way safer than the other, and I didn't pick that one because I was 24 and, thought I was invincible.
And the night shift is god awful. So,
it's also sort of like, man, I volunteered to do all this stuff. Like, now I'm all trained up. Like, I want to do the Army stuff, right? So, I went out sometimes in street clothes, met with folks, spent a lot of time with people of questionable allegiances who were more armed than me and outnumbered me. Anyway, and I did 4 months doing that. And then I came back, became an officer candidate school platoon trainer in the Guard. And then at the same time, ran for office. I ran for state legislature, won a race representing Kansas City in the state legislature. Then at the age of 31, became the first millennial ever to win statewide office in the country. I became the Secretary of State of Missouri. And the whole time was dealing with untreated, undiagnosed post-traumatic stress, nightmares, the whole deal. Right. And telling myself like, well, I can't have post-traumatic stress. I never got blown up, and not realizing that the experience of like running around trying not to get kidnapped all the time could be pretty traumatic. And then, I had a very successful political career going, ran for the U.S. Senate, got the silver medal, but outperformed the top of the ticket by 16 points, which kind of put me on the map. That and an ad where I assembled a rifle blindfolded. I'm giving you my whole life story.
I remember that.
Yeah. That's what usually gets people. That's what people remember. And so I did that, ended up frankly kind of famous as a result of that. And then was like, well, what do I do now? Started an organization to fight for voting rights. And next thing I knew, people were talking about me running for president. President Obama said some very nice things about that possibility, basically. And then I was thinking, I'm going to run for president. And the whole time I was actually getting worse as far as my own symptoms and not dealing with it at all. Somewhere in there, also, two things that happened. I had a child with my son was born. My wife and I have been together since we were 17. I kind of skipped that part. The other thing that happened is the Royals won the World Series twice in that story I've told you so far. Yeah. So those are the major events. And then, just kind of burned out. I got to the point where it's like, I was realizing that I was putting too much stress on myself, but I didn't know what was wrong. I wouldn't admit to myself it was post-traumatic stress. And I said, you know what? Rather than run for president in 2020, I'm going to go home. I'm going to run for mayor of Kansas City. That was going great. I was going to win by a country mile, but I just got worse and worse. Had suicidal thoughts, and just October 2nd of 2018, this is like, things were going great professionally. Like, my book was a New York Times bestseller. My podcast debuted at #1 in the country. We were going to win the mayor's race, but I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to live through this. So I stepped back, went to the VA, got help, and did about 8 months of therapy. And now I work here, and I'm sitting down with y'all. That's my life story. Nice. There you go.
Yeah, I as far as the therapy, when Jeff and I first met, I had just gotten out. And when I was still active duty military, it was a really big thing to you just don't talk about mental health. It's just not something you do. I was fast tracked to staff sergeant. I think I made staff sergeant at 4 years. And so you just didn't talk about it. And It was a career ender. Yeah. And so when I got out, I had been undiagnosed, just everything, had not done anything. And I was telling Jeff, I was having days where it was like, I'm not going to make it out of this bed, and I may not make it out of this bedroom. Like, I don't know, I don't know. And Jeff was like, that emotional numbness, that just I can't feel anything. What's the point of this? Yeah. And I was, I was not showing up to class and just being like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm bored, I'm isolated. I don't know. But he was like, man, just go see somebody. Go. That's good. And it was good. Yeah. It was good.
And, how did you two meet? I'm sure you've said this on the podcast.
Him and I met in school. We're both non-trad, the traditionals at KU, and
both the pre-med route.
Both on pre-med. So we were in a lot of the same classes. I think I met him about a month into my first semester back in school. I mean, when you're 30 at KU, you kind of tend to stand out a little bit. So,
and also, like, vets just kind of see each other across the room. It's like two dogs at a stoplight.
Yeah. And I actually think Jeff had an EIB on his bag. And I was like,
I see. Yeah.
Who's this dude?
Yeah.
So, and I went through, my own kind of mental health journey, and we've talked about it a little bit, but it's kind of the same thing, it's one of those things, like, you keep saying, I can help myself. And then you kind of have to hit that wall almost before at least that's how it was for me. I basically, how it worked for me was I was just kind of listlessly floating through, and I'm a diabetic. I was not taking care of myself. And my mom basically told me one day, you are going to therapy. And I actually went to, it's a center over in Olathe, Cottonwood Springs.
Okay.
And they have, they're a wonderful place. I can't say enough nice things about those folks, but I went and did their outpatient therapy for about a month and a half, something like that. And I came back out on the other side, and I was not diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And I came out on the other side, and I was like, I've been living my life under a shroud for almost 8 years, and I couldn't believe it. And that was a really eye-opening experience to me. And that's why when Tom and I first met, and we got to know each other a little better, and I was kind of seeing some of the stuff he was struggling through, like you saying, having a hard time getting out of bed, or having a hard time, just doing the things you need to do. It was pretty obvious to me, that I saw a lot going on with him that I had experienced. And I was very much like, hey man, you can get help for this. You don't have to live like this, And so I think that, I think that that's such a powerful thing, just that whole idea of the snowball effect that, you take what you've learned and you pass it on to other people that can use it. And, that's one of the things actually when Tom and I first were talking about potentially getting a chance to come do a podcast with you, I think that's one of the most amazing things. I mean, you've done some incredible stuff.
Yep, nice.
But like just the idea, that, literally you probably did more for mental health, just doing what you did and, being there on the public stage. And most people ever be able to do in a lifetime. And, hats off to you for that.
Yeah. Well, I was really fortunate to be able to do that. It's the most important thing I've ever done. And, you were describing about like feeling like you've been living under a shroud. That's totally right. Like it is like all of a sudden being able to see in color.
Yeah, it is.
It's like the Wizard of Oz.
Well,
yeah.
I was telling Tom, and I've told this story before on the podcast, but I remember when I was going through my therapy, one of the things my therapist was really big on was, re-engaging with your old hobbies and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I used to read a lot, and I hadn't read. I probably hadn't read a book for a year and a half,
right.
or maybe even longer than that. And I picked up a book that it was just a fantasy novel. My brother got me for Christmas like 2 years before, been sitting on my shelf. And I remember sitting there, and I was probably about 2-3 weeks into my therapy, and I was reading this, and I got just such this like rush of emotion, like literally I got goosebumps on my arms, and I would just like, that was like that kind of light switch moment for me. I was like, holy shit, what is that feeling?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think once you get that glimpse of the way things can be again, it's just like, it's just hard to get people on board sometimes with getting the process initiated. And that's why, I'm so big about just, I think everybody could use a therapist. I really do, honestly.
For sure.
100%.
For sure.
Yeah, my big thing was a lot of mine was, the only thing I wanted to hit on with PTSD and is moral injury, because when I got injured, I felt like my whole life, I felt like the Army just turned their back on me.
Tell me more about your story.
So I ended up tearing my PCL in the Iraq-Syrian border in 15.
What happened?
And so basically coming out of a vehicle, copper. And when I landed, I thought I sprained my MCL, but I ended up tearing my PCL.
That's the one on the outside?
So I sprained the one on the outside. The PCL goes right under the patella bone, like in the middle of the knee, basically.
I did an ACL long time ago.
PCL is a really weird thing to tear. Yeah. It never happens. And so...
car injuries, car accidents.
Car. So it was
like
really
major
weird.
Trauma injury normally.
And so I was I had literally been at Fort Riley for maybe 4 months. I didn't really know my chain of command, didn't really know anyone. A guy that I'm really good friends with, David Dean, he was the first sergeant at the time. He left a month after I got there. So I knew no one. And so you got this new guy, gets there, gets an injury that kind of looks suspicious, because they go in, they do an MRI, they don't find anything. And I'm like, guys, like, I can't walk. Like I can't do anything. My knee was swelling at the top, and what it was, they thought maybe, okay, I had like a quad injury, like going down 3 ligaments going down. Maybe I tore the middle or sprained or something. Yeah. And so they get back. I finally, almost a year and a half later, they put me through physical therapy, all this crazy stuff. I get back, and I met a major who was like, hey man, I'm going to take another look at it. So he looks at it and he was like, dude, where there's smoke, there's fire. And he was like, I think there may be something going on. And he was like, I don't want to do like a full on, take the kneecap off, get in there, do like an actual repair, but I'd like to do 2 slits on the side of each knee, put a camera up in there. Let's scope it out. Let's see what's going on. And we got done with it. And he was like, oh dude, you had a major PCL tear. And he was like, I don't know how.
And
like,
he fixed it.
Yeah. He did a microfracture, screwed 3 in there. And he told me later on, and honestly, I'm guessing just because being in shape, I'm better off. But he told me after the surgery, he was like, dude, in 5 to 10 years, you're gonna need another surgery. Like I could have done so much more in there. I'm hoping the microfracture, because the problem with the microfracture is whether it'll take or not is you basically drill these micro holes in cartilage, and you hope that the underlying cartilage fills it up. And so it did. And I would say at 31, I'm in better shape now than I was 10 years ago, to be honest.
Yeah, because
I'm not.
Yeah, but you're like, I got this thing working now. I want to see what I can do.
Now I'm going to see what and I know, and I told my buddy's in 3rd group, and I told him, I said, watch, man, I'm going to go to selection, fall off an obstacle course, tear my whole knee, life's going to be over. No, but I
mean, don't put that energy.
No, I know. But no, I'm curious. I'm happy with it. And yeah, that's what I did. I got healthy again, and I was like, I'm going to go back back and give it a second try, man. See what happens.
It's funny. That's like, I mean, my stuff was not physical, but I didn't know that. Like, my back hurt all the time, and so much of it turns out was just my mental health. Like, it was causing me not to exercise. And now I think I'm in better physical shape than I was even when I was in the military, because when I was saying, like, you're like, oh, I got this thing working, and now I feel that way. I'm like, okay, my body works now. Like, I want to see what it can do, and it's exciting.
And that's how mine was with the what they classify the moral injury as, like a betrayal. You know, I for a long time was getting out, and I was like, I had all this weight on me.
Oh, I'm sure you had terrible survivor's guilt.
Expectations, and I can't believe I'm out. And then started going to school. But I told Jeff this, the weirdest thing about, one, going through an injury and getting out and having like this, you know, injury that you're not sure how to deal with, was that about the first 60 days I was out, I lived with another guy who actually ended up getting colon cancer. Jason had colon cancer, not pancreatitis. Colon cancer. Mm-hmm. And went through remission. He was fine, but he got med boarded out. We were the same age. And he's this physically fit specimen.
So were you med boarded out?
Yeah. And the major was actually, he came, I got out of surgery, did my post-op, and he was like, you're never going to run again. And I was like, that cannot be true, man. And he was like, no, I'm serious. Like, you're going to be put on physical profile, and I'm going to recommend that you change MOSs. And I was like, what's the other option? He was like, med board. I was like, throw it. Let's do it. So did that. Of course, I can run again. So, I was, I felt betrayed by not only by my body, by the government, by like all these things. So I was with my first 60 days out, every day I would wake up and I would have this nauseous feeling. And I sat down with Jason one day and I was like, hey man, I just want to see if I'm crazy. Do you ever feel like they're going to call you to come back in, or like something's wrong, or like you're going to go to jail? And I was like, and I haven't done anything, you know? And he was like, every day. I was like, all right, well, everybody's crazy. I was like, yeah, great. But it was just that, it was like a survivor's guilt. Man. It was dealing with that behavior.
I think one of the things that's interesting, though, is that, I mean, there definitely is something to that, the physical manifestations of, you know, mental health or lack of mental health. You know, I remember one of the things that I used to get all the time was I was constantly like kind of like slumping my shoulders and hanging my head. And I would get these like golf ball knots under my shoulder blades. And like, it was just the worst.
Nerd neck. That's what they call it.
Nerd neck is right. So, yeah, you're a huge nerd too. So.
I am. I got it bad.
Well, you guys have a podcast. So
it's not, that's how we became I'm
saying like you're automatically nerds.
We're nerds.
I say that as somebody who had a podcast.
But that's how we became so close too, is that Jeff started coming over. First semester we got together, Jeff would come over about 5 a.m. for coffee. We both get up about 4 a.m. So he'd come over, because
I don't get up at 4 a.m. anymore.
I do. Well,
you better. You're about to go
I got things to do. Yeah, but we'd come over and have coffee, and we would just talk about books, and we would talk about them. We both read a lot. And he looked at me one day and was like, hey man, we should start a podcast. And I was like, well, I got all this stuff, man, because I'd been planning on starting one. And I was like, let's do it.
So that's great.
Well, so here we are.
Yeah. So I'm pleased to be invited to coffee. That's great.
Yeah, definitely.
That's basically what it is, huh?
Well, it's almost past coffee time. I'm about ready for my first beer.
I actually don't even drink coffee. I just feel like I got an invite.
That's funny you say that, because Jeff and I both kind of stopped drinking coffee.
Yeah.
Not totally. I still drink, but not like we used to.
No, I mean, it used to be like pound a whole coffee pot in the morning.
Yeah. Well, I got diagnosed with anxiety, and my therapist was like, how much coffee do you drink a day? And I was like, 94 ounces. And she was like, no, seriously. I was I drink 94.
That's a lot.
It was a lot of coffee. We were drinking coffee like all the time.
It's like how much water you're supposed to drink.
But I was getting it with the water too. Mix and matching.
No joke. We would, like, in the mornings, we would have
all the time.
We would have 2 to 3 pots of coffee in the morning.
Before 6 a.m.
Before I got there. Like, you want to talk about getting wired up for your day. Right?
And she was like, I need you to cut back to 12 ounces before noon. That's it. And I was like, okay. So started.
Was a good call.
It was, and it did help. You know,
it's fascinating to me that you knew exactly how many ounces, but weren't like, this seems like too much. Like, you were like, well, you were able to 94 ounces. Like I know that I drink that much water because I put it in a thing in my fridge every night, and then.
But that's what I do.
I don't drink that much water.
Yeah. Now, Jeff and I have a funny story about that. We were talking about water one day, and I told Jeff, I was like, dude, 95% of people in the world do not drink enough. And Jeff's like, no, I definitely drink it. And I was like, I guarantee you that if you start walking,
I'm not worried about the fact that you're going to be a doctor, Jeff.
But he came back to me like 2 days later. He's like, dude, you're right. I drink
a lot
about
of people
half.
are worried about that. believe it or not.
I'm worried about me being a doctor.
Adulthood is just really mostly just trying to stay hydrated.
Yeah, no, that's
all
it.
it
Yeah.
is.
Sleeping,
pretty much.
sleeping and hydrating. That's all adulthood
That's really
is.
all it is, man.
I can fast. I don't need food. But
No, absolutely. In fact, I was putting together my dinner plans for after this on the drive over. So.
I was going to text you and see if you want to go get barbecue.
Well, yeah, you should. You're around here. You should.
Yeah,
Yes, you should.
this is a good spot if you want to go get some good food.
So, what's next for Jason Kander, and what's next for VCP? How do you?
They're pretty much one and the same.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Is,
yeah,
which is nice. For the longest time, I thought about what's next as well. I thought about it all the time, right? Because the present was no fun. And so I was always, well, I can run for this, or I could do this, or whatever, and then I could do that. I don't do that anymore.
Right.
And it's interesting because, and you didn't ask it this way, which I appreciate, but the most common question I get ever is, are you going to run for something? What's next for you?
Jeff and I went to your speech, and I told him, I thought I asked a semi-important question to me, to me
No, I
personally.
remember it was a good question.
And everyone else that they would always like ask kind of a question, but then they would caveat it with, so are you like thinking about a presidential run? And I was like, okay. All right, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I'm just not. Right. I think of, and it's really nice I'm just enjoying life so much that I really like what I do here, and I want to get as many VCPs set up around the country as I possibly can. It's needed everywhere. But like, what I'm excited about is like, I think about life in terms of workouts. Like, I'm sore today because yesterday was heavy leg day, and then like, I know, that Wednesday is basketball practice for my son, and I assistant coach that team. And I know that baseball starts again. He's 6, by the way, and I'm this serious about it. Baseball starts again in April, and it's machine pitch now, and I coach that team. And so like, that's great, and I'm engaged in politics still. Like, obviously don't care about it any less than I used to.
Right.
And it's not like I suddenly think the country's going in some great direction. Like, that hasn't changed. Therapy will not undo my being convinced that we're not going in the right direction. And so I'll get out in 2020 and I'll campaign for the Democratic nominee, and I'll do some TV, and I opine on social media and all that. But honestly, like, and this can change, but right now, like, after 6 p.m., like, I don't work.
Right. See,
that's a big deal for me.
That's one of the things I've been really curious about. Like, what is it like, after being in politics and that, like, just having kind of that work-life balance now. And, I assume, like you said, 6 o'clock, you're checked out. I assume you're home with, your wife and son. And, has that just been amazing for you as well?
It's incredible. And it's, at first, so it's been about 14 months since I like stepped back from public life, and, now I'm back in it. But when I pulled the plug on things there. And like, at first, like, it was really hard. Like, I remember first time I went to therapy, I said to my therapist, I said, I've stepped back from everything. Like, I can be here every day if you want me to. Right. And he goes, yeah, we're going to slow you down.
Yeah.
He was like, you're going to do weekly therapy, and you're going to have to do your homework in between, like your prolonged exposure, listen, anybody who's been through it will know what I mean. And that was really hard. And he knew it would be, and it was good for me because I had been for a decade having a lot of trouble being present, and I really had to work on it. And I had to focus on mental health and doing the exercises and everything. But now, and I referred to it as my sabbatical, right? So like, I didn't work during that period. I had the urge. I just felt like, I'd spent so much of my life feeling like I didn't do enough when I was in. So now I've got to redeem myself by like, I did 40 years of work in 10 years, and I just never stopped working, because if I stopped working, I had to deal with what was going on in my head, Mm-hmm. So it just, over a few months, I started to really settle into it, to a point where I almost got too settled in. Like, there was a point where I was like, I couldn't really figure out how to work on something again. Yeah. And then slowly I did. And then now I'm like really hitting a good balance, because I've now arrived at the point where, like, heck, I got a bunch of friends running for president, and I keep in close touch with them because they're friends and everything. And sometimes because they want to come and see this place or whatever. Or they want to talk about veterans policy or just whatever. Or they just want to talk to somebody who doesn't want to talk about politics, whatever it is. And the thing that's changed is that was still happening a little bit the first few months of me taking time off. But I had this like tremendous conflict within me, right? Like I should be out there. I would be doing well, right? You know, I think I'd be pulling well, whatever. And now I'm like, I don't want to.
Right.
But I love what I do. And I work here. And there was an interesting day where, so we've had so far 3 presidential candidates visit. And the first one that came was Pete Buttigieg. And so Pete and I have been friends for a few years. And I walked Pete around this place and everything. And then at the end of the little tour, you know, the press throngs all followed Pete. And he went to his black SUV to leave. And that used to be what I did, you know, like I did the whole dry run for president thing. I did Iowa and New Hampshire and had, not that many cameras, like Pete's doing pretty well. And we're also like in an actual campaign season, you know, but I did that and I got in the SUV and I drove away. And it was when I was doing it, I thought like, well, this is the only way to be, right? Like I'll never, you know, I'm never going to be happy waking up in the same place every day and all that. And when he left, it was interesting because I walked back over here to the headquarters building with our team here, and I don't know if this is a G-rated podcast or, but
no, it's absolutely not at all.
We've actually
veteran focused. I would think not.
Yeah, we
got a little hammered on one episode.
We did a bourbon episode, and it was
all right. Good.
Yeah,
so a little weird.
So I shot the shit with everybody here for a while, and I was like, man, this is interesting. I not only do I not want to be in that vehicle, but I've driven up I-35 to Des Moines many times for when I thought I was going to run, and it's like, I don't want to be in that car. I want to be right here, and I want to go pick up my kid from school. And so that's a very long answer to a short question, Jeff. But
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's like it was just this evolution to where now I'm like, when people ask me, are you ever going to run for office again? What I think of is like, I understand now why people wait till their kids are grown to do that. Like my son is a blast, man, and we'd like to have another, and he loves this place too, Veterans Community Project. That's the other thing. Like he understands, like he gets, you know, he went to New Hampshire and he saw me give speeches and like he gets Dad was going to run for president and he gets Dad was going to be mayor and all that stuff. But he's 6. Like he didn't know what the hell that really means, right? But this place, like he thinks it's so cool. He gets it. And there was one day where we were driving down the road and we're at a stoplight. And there was a homeless guy next to us. But, you know, I was thinking about something else, just kind of eyes straightforward. And True, my son, he says, Dad, do we have any money? And I was like, why? And he said, well, we should give it to that guy. And so I was like, oh, yeah. So I give the guy $1. And so then I'm telling him, like, True, that's great, buddy. Like, I was not paying attention and you're being really caring. And he said, well, he had on an army jacket. I think maybe he was an army man. And he's homeless and he's going to be cold tonight. And he was like, and that's what you do, Dad. That's what you do. You help Army people who are homeless. And like, I got really emotional and like, but it was cool because right then I thought like, I can do this for the rest of my life. Like my son understands what this is. I understand what this is. And the other thing was like, it was great. And I feel like I helped, you know, I did a lot of good, but I know what I'm doing here. Like I know the impact we're having.
Yeah, I think one of the really, you know, you kind of opened up and you talked about, you know, the idea of service, right? And I think that that's important to illustrate that there are different levels of service, and what y'all are doing here at Veterans Community Project is a very personal level of service to people.
Yeah,
and like I said, I think that's phenomenal.
It's the best, man.
You guys put up an Instagram post the other night of, and I mean, it had to be 11 o'clock, I think, but it was basically like, hey, we're getting 2 rooms ready for 2 people moving in. And when we started this podcast, we started it with like a general conversation focus. We weren't sure what we were going to do. And now we've kind of been swept into the veteran, you know, umbrella, which is totally fine with us. We, you know, it could be war history and we'd still be in. Yeah, I mean, that's just us. But we've talked to, are you familiar with Headstrong?
Yeah, Zach is
Okay, so yeah, we're trying to get him on as well.
Oh, yeah.
And spoke to him. Did
you talk to him already?
We've reached out. We've communicated through Instagram, but
okay.
You know, if you want,
I can help if you want.
You want to text him.
He and I actually are due to have a call this week.
Yeah, and so you know, I talked about them on the live stream the other night, and they of course liked it and you know talked about it to me and stuff. But I just thought that when I went through, and Jeff and I as well, when we both went through the mental side of what we were doing, it just became really important to me that when we did our first podcast. Our first podcast was on suicide, depression, anxiety, and
just mental
health in general, right?
And sounds like a really fun. It's a way to pilot.
And it was. I'm kidding you. It was beautiful. I mean, it was great.
Well,
but we would have people reach out to us and be like, I was going to kill myself, and I listened to your podcast, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, right?
I think the reason it took off in that direction is, that was kind of one of the first things we wanted to go through because, like I said, I'd recently been through it. Tom was still kind of going through it.
Yeah.
And, it was something that was very personally important to us, and we knew that we could, and we kind of branched out and did some other things at the beginning, but it kind of has focused back in on this. And I'm sure, we'll kind of be all over the board knowing us, but we really like the idea just because, like what you guys are doing here, just raising the awareness and, that's the one great thing about, like this project here, it doesn't matter where you are in America, what your views are, pretty much everybody can get behind the idea of, helping veterans and get behind the idea of mental health. And
the reason I thought this was so important, and the reason that I'm glad we did it in, December and not, on Veterans Day or on Memorial Day or on suicide, mental health awareness month was my biggest problem with everything is that on Veterans Day, everyone loves veterans.
Right.
Yep.
On Memorial Day, everyone, loves to think about past veterans and those who have fallen, okay. And then we do the Movember. I just shaved my mustache last night, but we do Movember for men's health, and we did breast cancer awareness month, and we did the mental health awareness month. And it's great to highlight that, 1 month out of the year, but these are like important topics that everyone should be talking about. And I made a comment to Stephanie, and I actually listened to the podcast we did with her the other day, and I liked her response a lot. But I said, one of the biggest things that used to bother me 4 or 5 years ago was the 22 a day push-up things. And I was like, man, there's so much more you could be doing instead of uploading videos of you doing 22 push-ups a day. And I get it. It's important, and Stephanie, because I told her that I thought it looked kind of selfish, that it was more for likes. And she responded, well, maybe that's all they think they can do, or maybe that's and I was like, damn, now I feel like an asshole.
Well, you're not. Like your instinct is how this place came around, right? I mean, it's just like a lot of us, and I can't speak for the founders, but for me, like what frustrates the hell out of me, and you've heard me say this before, is yellow ribbon magnets, on cars. Like you put a yellow ribbon on, you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But I went through the same journey you did, which is I spent a lot of time, years, just being angry that people thought that did something. And then I realized just what Stephanie said to you, which is, people want to do more. They have no idea what to do.
None.
And that's really what I love so much about this place is this place says, okay, you don't have to just stand up at a ball game and applaud somebody who gets recognized on the Jumbotron. This is a place where you can come and, like, if you're a mental health provider, you can do it here. If you're a veterinarian, we got veterans who have dogs and they can't pay for veterinary services. You can do it here. Dentists, eye surgeons, you name it. Anybody, it doesn't matter. You can swing a hammer, you can build a house, you can stuff hygiene kits. Like you can do anything here. And it's really brought veterans and the community together. And it's just recognized that everybody wants to do something, but nobody knows. Even veterans don't know what to do for other veterans. Like we get out. And it's not like you can just call the first sergeant and be like, hey, can I get so-and-so's number? I mean, it don't work that way anymore. Now, there's a lot of things we can change to make it work that way, but that's a whole other conversation. But people just want to do stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the genius of this place is it was like, let's give people a place to do stuff for veterans. And when you do, they will.
It was we had talked previously about the team Red, White, and Blue doing the volunteer, basically it's just hanging Christmas lights, right, for the veteran. And I would have never known about that unless I was on the Team Red, White, and Blue Facebook page. Right. I would have never known. That would not have popped up on anything I've known. I wouldn't have seen it. And I really do think that we're in an age now to where, 10, 15 years ago, these programs didn't exist. Right. And social media was starting to come up, but now we're in a place now to where you're starting to see a lot of veterans that are like actually coming together. Like it's really surprising to me because for a long time when I got out, I was like, man, I really don't know anyone. I knew Jeff, and then I'm starting to see like a lot of people over in the KC area, especially with the Team Red, White, and Blue. We have, do you know what Go Ruck is?
I've heard of it. I can't remember. You told me about it.
I probably did.
Yeah, but I don't remember what you said.
So it was basically a special forces cadre, started a company when he got out. He just loved rucking, so they started doing all this. Well, we started LFK Ruck Club together, and that was 3 months ago.
Oh my God.
And we're up to like 70 members now. People just people I don't even know.
Go for a nice walk.
Yeah, go
cool.
for it.
We
Yeah.
had a group out for the Veterans Day 5K. We rucked it. And
That's awesome.
I hadn't put on a rucksack in a decade.
Yeah,
so.
we did
some of the best bullshit, no matter of any content whatsoever, conversations I've ever had have been on ruck.
Oh, yeah.
So that's fantastic.
Speaking of that,
and on the bus ride home.
We got this Marine Corps.
I was just
Were you about to talk? Go ahead, talk about Richie.
No, you go.
Richie's okay. So Richie, first time, Richie's just a special person. He's going to listen to this, so he'll know. But he showed up to one of our study sessions and hopped in with us. I didn't know who he was, and I mentioned to an Air Force cadet, like, "Hey man, you should come out and ruck with us." And this guy like turns around, and he goes, "You ruck?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I ruck."
This is Richie, not the Air Force.
No.
The Air Force cadet was like, "What is a ruck?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because we have one that came out, and I hope he listens too. He's going to fail PJ school, and but he is a horrible human being. But no, he came out and he called me and he was like, "I really like to come ruck, but I don't know what a ruck is." And I said,
"Oh, that's so great that my joke was a real."
Yeah, it was super real. They don't issue them. And so I said, "Dude, I have one for you. Don't worry about it. Come out." So he did great.
Yeah.
Well, Richie, the first time, Jeff had known him for a while.
Yeah, I randomly met him at a bus stop at KU like last year. And I had no idea he was a Marine. I just like had a random conversation with him. And then like I said, about probably 3 months ago, Tom and I ran into him and
he popped up. And so he came out to one of the first a cold event actually, and it was me, him, and just a guy that graduated from KU that's a naval officer in Rhode Island, and he happened to be visiting for the weekend. He said, "I'm going to come out." I said, "Yeah, come out." This guy comes out, he brings like his 3-year-old kid, like no big deal. First thing Richie says to him, "Oh, you're a Navy officer? Man, I fucking hate officers." And then he's like, "Oh, okay, dude." He's like, we're just like, all right. And Richie's like, out of nowhere, he just goes, "I remember this time that's what it was. The Marine Corps birthday was coming up." Yes. He goes, "I'm going to get so trashed." And I said, "Yeah, man." He goes, "I remember a few years ago in Vegas, I just did a bunch of coke and rented like 6 hookers." And I was like, "Who are you?" And the guy's looking at this guy's looking at me, and I'm looking at Richie, and I'm like, "I don't know him." So after we get in the car, and I invited the officer to breakfast at Alchemy, and Richie, of course, goes, Richie had told us, "Hey, we got to make this ruck fast. I got to go do something." Well, I invite this guy to breakfast. Richie goes, "I'll be there." I was like, Jesus Christ, right? So I as we're getting in the car, I text the officer. I was like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry. I don't know him, but Richie ends up being an actual really, really dedicated guy, a really good guy." But we did the Veterans 5K. He rucked with a pony keg.
Yeah, we got a guy who sounds just like that here. He was amazing. But yeah, we have a ruck coming up this Friday, right? December the 7th. Yeah, we're either going to do
this Friday.
So the 7th is Saturday. So we have the 7th. We're going to do a Chosen Reservoir memorial ruck, and then at the end we're going to do a 1-minute plunge into Clinton Lake for Pearl Harbor remembrance. Well, we got to do the Pearl Harbor. I told somebody was like, they were like, "That sounds horrible," and I was like, "So does dying in the Pacific."
The water in Pearl Harbor is a lot warmer.
But okay, that was an awesome comment.
Yeah, well,
that's fantastic.
But no, I mean, in closing though, do you want to highlight anything with what you're doing in the future, what people can look for, and then how? Sure. Not only that, how because I mean we're basically in every state, how they can help with you guys moving forward and coming to different cities.
I appreciate the opportunity. So folks can go to veteranscommunityproject.org. So it's veteranscommunityproject.org. You can go there. First thing is people can donate. You just hit the big donate button and make a contribution. We are entirely donation based because we serve every type of veteran with no limits. Doesn't matter their discharge status. Doesn't matter any of that stuff. We're not currently eligible for federal funding. So most people think like, oh, it must be a VA program. We're not. We're totally private donation based. So if people want to support us, that's the way to do it. veteranscommunityproject.org/donate. And then, if somebody, like, as we look around the country and we're looking at where to expand to, you can go to the website, you can send us an email. There's been plenty of inquiries that have turned into real serious conversations, and they've come through people just going to the website, shooting us an email and saying, "Hey," but you got to do more than send us an email that says, "Hey, I live here and I'd like to get involved and expand." Like, you got to tell us, like, here's who I know, here's what I do, give us a real sense of who we're dealing with. And we, sometimes that's the beginning of what ends up being an expansion. So. All right. And then want to plug the social media handles for you guys? Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. So Veterans Community Project, you can find us at VCP_HQ. So at VCP_HQ, that's on Twitter. That's Instagram, and then Facebook is just at Veterans Community Project, and then I'm on all the same stuff, but I'm just at Jason Kander.
You want to plug your book?
The book is.
It's a good book.
It's done well.
It is a good book.
I feel weird plugging it like a year later, but sure, if people want to read, it was a New York Times bestseller. People seem to like it.
Yeah, it was a good book.
It's called. Thank you.
I'm super hesitant, by the way, when I buy books, especially for people, and I'm
especially by politicians.
Well, that's another thing. Yeah,
I don't read those. Like that's
me either.
The backstory on that is like, I'd kind of hit this little wind pocket in pop culture to where people knew me, and so then publishers call and they're like, "Why don't you write a book?" And like 9 out of 10 publishers were like, "We want you to write a book about where the Democratic Party should go." And I was like, I would never read that book. And they're like, "Yeah, but people will buy it." And I was like, so I wrote the most unpolitician-like memoir book. It's called Outside the Wire, 10 Lessons I've Learned in Everyday Courage. My unofficial title for it was Outside the Wire, How to Go into Politics Without Becoming a Tool. I mean, it's basically what it is. And it's fun. I think it's a fun book. So
I do have one more question for you on air.
Oh, sure.
Do you know Andrew Yang?
I've texted with him. He's one of the few candidates I don't really know.
Oh, yeah. So we're polling at 3, Andrew. Let's get it, baby.
You're a Yang.
I'm a Yang guy. I'm a Yang guy.
I think he's pretty interesting.
I think he's super interesting.
Yeah,
I really like him a lot.
Yeah. No, I know most of them just because we've run in the same circles for so long, but he's a little newer to it.
He is.
We crossed over I think there were a few times where like we were speaking at the same place, but we didn't meet. And then, next thing you knew, I was on my sabbatical, but, he has said some nice things about Veterans Community Project. So we texted about that but I've not met him.
Okay.
Outstanding. Well, hey, we just want to say thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come.
Thanks for coming all the way here.
And, we really appreciate not only what you're doing for veterans, but what you're doing just for the Kansas City area as a whole. And, thank you and best of luck to you and happy holidays.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Thank you for not being the Democratic Chris Kobach. I just want to say that on air.
Well, I try to be the whole alternative.
Oh my God.
I try to be the whole alternative to Kobach.
Yeah, no joke, right?
Yeah. It's
my mom and dad could not understand why I would not vote for Chris Kobach. That's not being recorded, is it, Mom?
I think that's fine.
We can edit it right after you stopped.
I mean, I got a Kobach story if you want.
I do.
Yes, please. I want to record.
It's in the book, but
yes.
Maybe I am pitching the book. I don't know.
There we go.
So I got elected Missouri Secretary of State in November of 2012, took office in January. And like 2 weeks after I took office, there was the National Association of Secretaries of State conference in DC, which, as you might imagine, is a huge, raging, amazing party. No, it's not. It's just what you would think. It's a bunch of secretaries of state sitting around talking about, running elections and stuff like that. Now, historically, it has been a very nonpartisan organization in the sense that, there's Democrats and Republicans, but there's not really supposed to be a partisan way to run an election or to like regulate, investment fraud and that kind of thing. But then Chris Kobach came along. I think he got elected in 2010. So he'd been there a couple of years longer than me. And maybe he'd been elected before that. I'm not sure. But he had sort of this little band of Tea Party sycophants that would follow him around. And I was very familiar with Kobach. Like we share a media market here in Kansas City. It's kind of weird that the way now since then that life has developed where I was kind of the main guy pushing voting rights and he was the main guy pushing not voting rights. And like, it is kind of weird that we live like a half hour apart. Like when we're nationally, we're in this fight against each other. But anyway, at that time, nobody knew who that guy was. And I show up and first thing that happens is Kobach puts forward this resolution where he wants the entire Secretary of State's Association nationally to sign on to this letter to President Obama saying, don't do any legislation whatsoever to decrease waiting times or to make it easier to vote. Like we're totally against that. Right. And I'm going, and everybody, they're not really sure about Kobach yet, most of them. So they're like, what is this? And I know what it is because I know this dude's deal. And so I'm like, wait a minute, this is a hugely partisan thing you're trying to get this organization to do. And he's like, no, it's not at all partisan, no. And anyway, we go back and forth, and it gets kind of awkward when I, the guy who had been there all 5 minutes, told him, look, it is partisan. And I said, look, it's not my fault that one party wants to keep the federal government out of elections, and the other party wants to let black people vote. No, it got a little awkward when I said that. And anyway, I ended up winning the thing by like 1 vote, and it was a big melee. But he and I are not like friendly.
Right. Yeah, well, I don't understand why. He is the pride of Kansas after all.
Well, I moved here right as the Royals won the World Series. So right as they went to the World Series 15. And I told Jeff that not knowing anything about Brownback, not knowing anything about the past, whatever, I saw Chris once in person. I was like, that's a slimy dude, man. I said, I will not be voting for that guy. I was like, whatever happens.
He's got a scary talent, which is he can take really, really, really malicious and bad policies and say them in a very, very reasonable sounding way. Yeah. It's very dangerous. Yeah. And I used to have this little sort of fun thing I would do with myself because we're both doing so much stuff around the Kansas City area. You mentioned like the thing with the Royals. I had this little fun thing I did where if his name came up, if people would ask about it, I would just think like, okay, who's the next team either the Chiefs or the Royals are playing? And I would just drop in a casual reference pretending he was a huge fan of that team. So like the first time I ever did it, it was when we were in the ALCS in 2014 against the Orioles. And somebody was like, well, do you and Kobach get along? And I was like, well, we haven't talked in a while. I said, but I'm pretty sure he's a hardcore Orioles fan. I was like, so I'm sure that he's just very busy this week. And then but I never explain it. I just drop it in and I just leave it. And I did that for several years, and I have no idea if he ever, but in my dreams, I just hope that he did an event at some point where somebody was like, so you're like a huge Raiders fan, right? Like,
I am a huge Raiders.
Well, that's okay, but you're not running for statewide office in Kansas, so like, you can get away with it.
Well, that's true.
Not yet.
So that was my one little piece of like, that's the one time I've engaged in fake news.
Yeah,
is just sort of a little gentle like, just for fun for myself.
Jason, you can't say that on this podcast. Trump will Twitter you next week.
No, that's
Jason Kander engages in fake news.
I'm sure that's been drafted and not sent several times.
I'm sure it has too.
Thank you so much for coming on. I mean that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for what y'all are doing. This is cool.
Awesome. All right. You want to sound it off?
I don't even know how to do that.
I got it. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This is episode 14, Veterans Community Project. Thank you so much. And as always, Instagram, Patreon, you know where we're at. Good night, guys.